Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime Guru. I'm your host, Brock Scales. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, to please subscribe and turn on notifications. Subscribing will ensure that you stay up to date on all content, and it also helps support the channel and the cases that we cover. I also highly encourage engagement, so please follow the channel on all social media platforms and let me know your thoughts. Today's case is technically a homicide, but some might say it's more of a suspicious death. Around midnight on December 14th, 2016, 53-year-old Judy Orr Baldwin would be pronounced dead on arrival at the scene of a car accident. However, when investigators took a deeper look into the case later, it would be determined that something much more sinister had taken place. Judy Orr Baldwin, or Little Judy, as she was called because of her short height, was born on January 12, 1963. And would call Chester County, South Carolina, her home for her whole life. Chester County is a very rural area right smack in the middle of Columbia, South Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina. But Judy loved her small town life and her small town husband, Todd Orr. Todd was the captain of the Chester County Fire Department, while Judy was the sole proprietor of a business called Judy's Personal Touch. Judy and Todd welcomed two sons, Josh and Chris, and would spend over 2 blissful decades together. But their happy life would come to an end in 2004, when Todd was tragically killed in a motorcycle accident, leaving Judy heartbroken and lonely. As the next 8 years went by, Judy started to slowly pick herself back up and was ready to take another chance on love. In 2012, Judy met James, or Jamie, Baldwin, who was a fellow member of the Carolina Thunder Christian Motorcycle Club. And I guess Judy kind of had a thing for first responders, as Jamie was a former police officer and had spent a decade as a dispatcher for Chester County. The two embarked on a whirlwind romance, and after just 8 months of dating, they married. Judy's sons told Dateline that they liked Jamie, and it was nice to see their mom happy again. But tragedy would strike again, just 4 years later on December 14th, 2016. When Jamie had placed a call to 911 saying that he and Judy had just been involved in a terrible car accident. Jamie says that they were driving down rural Old Richburg Road in their Jeep Wrangler when suddenly a truck had started veering into their lane. Jamie overcorrected and 53-year-old Judy was ejected from the vehicle as the car tumbled down an embankment into a creek. Jamie says the accident had rendered him unconscious for a moment, but when he came to, he found Judy unresponsive in the creek. He told the 911 operator that he had been attempting CPR, but it was not working. First responders quickly arrived, including the Chester County coroner, Terry Tinker, who happened to be a good friend of Judy's. She would unfortunately be pronounced dead on arrival. Tinker would later testify that he felt something off about the scene and had urged the detective on the scene, Chris Reynolds, to treat this like it may be a homicide. But Reynolds would say, quote, "You know this is not a homicide," end quote, and would continue to treat the scene as an accident. Judy's son, Josh, arrived at the hospital after being told that his mother was involved in a car accident, only to find out that they did not have a record of Judy Baldwin being a patient there, but they did have a Jamie Baldwin. Chris soon joined, and when they entered Jamie's room, they were surprised to find that there was another woman there with him. This woman's name was Terry King, and she had supposedly been a friend of the couple. Jamie broke the tragic news to Josh and Chris, who were devastated to learn that now both of their parents had been killed in tragic accidents. Judy's nephew had discovered the news and decided to go over to the house to care for Judy's dog. When he went inside, he was surprised to find that there was a shocking amount of blood on the floor, walls, and in the bathroom. As far as everyone knew, this was just a tragic car accident, so you can imagine the nephew's surprise as to blood being found inside the home. Well, according to Jamie, the only reason they were even on the road that night was because they were on their way to the hospital after Judy had taken a bad fall. According to Jamie, Judy had been decorating the Christmas tree that night when he went outside to the garage. When he came back in, he had found that Judy had fallen off of a ladder by the fireplace and had hit her head on the mantle. He says that he took Judy to the bathroom and had attempted to clean her up, but that's when he decided that she probably needed stitches and that they needed to go to the hospital. So it seemed that Judy had been the victim of 2 accidents that night. As I mentioned, the lead detective on this case, Chris Reynolds, had determined that this was an accident and was treating it as such, even before the autopsy had been performed. This is not standard procedure, and in most police departments, you are supposed to treat every death as it may be a homicide until you are proven otherwise. For example, if you were to arrive on the scene where a man had suffered a bullet wound to the head and the weapon was located beside him. This may look like a suicide, but detectives are not supposed to make any assumptions and are supposed to close off and preserve the crime scene. Detective Reynolds did none of this. Neither Judy's or Jamie's clothes were collected. Nothing was collected from the house. All they did was take pictures at the house, and even the pictures came out like super blurry. And the worst part is Detective Reynolds had actually given permission to Terry King to clean up the blood at the house. He even gave her the number for a professional crime scene cleaning service, which is a little ironic considering that he did not consider it a crime scene. So I'm actually surprised that Detective Reynolds had asked Jamie Baldwin to come in for a formal interview. In this interview, Jamie tells his story about Judy falling off the ladder, him trying to clean her up, and then deciding to go to the hospital. Now, I do have to say that I do agree with Detective Reynolds that this story does seem to match what was found at the house and in the car. The blood at the house was near the mantle, in the fireplace, and in the bathroom, and there was a bloody washcloth found inside the car, which is consistent with Jamie's story of trying to clean up Judy's wounds. Jamie tells detectives that Judy was coherent while traveling down the road. He even says that the last thing they said to each other before the accident was, "I love you." When asked about the state of their marriage, Jamie says it was, quote, "about as perfect as you can get," end quote. Reynolds even tries to push a little bit, saying that every couple has problems, every couple fights, but Jamie stays persistent that their marriage was in good shape. Meanwhile, the Chester County coroner Terry Tinker was conducting Judy's autopsy. He had determined that the cause of death was likely a skull fracture caused by some sort of blunt force trauma. Judy's eyes had dark circles around them, which is consistent with blood accumulated in the skull. But something just still didn't feel right to Terry, so he had requested that a second autopsy be conducted by Dr. Janice Ross. She had come to a similar conclusion about the skull fracture, but could not determine if the trauma was caused by Judy's fall or the car crash. So she left the cause of death open as pending investigation. But there was no investigation being conducted, and Judy's family was starting to have suspicions of their own. Her niece, Jessie, could not wrap her mind around why Jamie was taking Judy to Piedmont Medical Center, which is about 30 miles away from their home, when Chester Hospital was only 2 minutes away. Also, the route that he was taking didn't make sense either. Jamie decided to take the back road, which would have taken approximately 33 minutes, when he could have taken I-77, which would have only been about 26 minutes. Jamie says that the reason they were not going to Chester Hospital was because Judy did not like that hospital and would have rather gone to Piedmont. This is something that I actually kind of believe. There are several hospitals in the city that I live in, and there are some that I literally refuse to go to. And I could see at the time, if they just thought Judy needed stitches, that she may not have cared to wait the extra time to go to a more preferable hospital. But the route part, I don't understand. Even if they did think, oh, it's just stitches, I still think that you would want to get to the hospital as fast as you could. But believe me, there will be more than just this that makes Jamie look super skeptical. Jessie was suspicious enough to have recorded a call between her and Jamie. In this call, she was questioning him about the timeline of events and was really thrown off when he said, quote, "We both know that she is in heaven. That's the good news," end quote. Jamie and even Andrea Canning with Dateline thought that this was a really strange way to word that, saying that it's good news. I'd really like to know your guys' thoughts on this because I really think it just depends on how you interpret it. On the more eerie side, he could be saying that it's good news that Judy is dead. But on the other hand, he could just be saying that it's good news that she's in heaven. And depending on what you believe, heaven usually has a positive connotation. Jessie brought her concerns to Josh and Chris, who were also starting to have their doubts about Jamie's story. Judy talked to her sons every day, and Josh even lived like 2 houses down from them. So they could not fathom how Judy would not have called them to let them know she was going to the hospital. They also started to wonder why Jamie didn't just call 911 and have an ambulance take Judy to the hospital faster. They started to wonder if Jamie and Judy's marriage was not almost as perfect as you can get, like Jamie said. One thing that did kind of corroborate their so-called perfect marriage was a Facebook post of Judy's weeks before her death. It was a throwback picture of Jamie and Judy's first Christmas together, captioned, "I love you more than you could ever imagine. Thank you for everything you do for us." Jamie had replied with, "I love you more." And Judy responded, "I don't think so," with an exclamation point. But we all know that what's shown on social media is usually not reality. And Judy's friend Kay would have a lot to say about what was really going on in the marriage. Kay told Dateline that Judy had confided in her about concerns of Jamie having an affair. Judy started to get the impression that Jamie and Terry King, the so-called friend of the couple, was more than a friend to Jamie. They both knew Terry through the bike club, which she was the treasurer of. According to Kay, Judy had confronted them both about the affair, in which they denied. But Kay told Dateline that Judy said they were so calm about it. If I were Judy, I'd probably be suspicious too, because if I'm confronting you about an affair and you're not freaking out and adamantly denying it, I would think something's up too. And just to top this all off, Terry would actually end up moving in with Jamie just a month and a half after Judy's death. Jamie would say that it was because he couldn't afford to live there on his own, and he was just renting a room to Terry. But if you couple this with the rumors of an affair, it certainly doesn't look good. It definitely didn't look good to Judy's family. And surprisingly, it wasn't sitting right with the district attorney's office either. They got word of this alleged affair and had also discovered that there was a life insurance policy taken out on Judy just 6 months before her death. I wasn't able to find the exact amount of the policy, but it was reported by Kylie with its crime o'clock somewhere that it wasn't even enough to pay for Judy's burial. So take that however you want. Either way, it was enough for prosecutors to say that this was no accident. It was murder. The prosecutors had a problem, though. They were worried that they couldn't take this case to trial with the lack of evidence that they had. They heavily scrutinized the Chester County Sheriff's Office for not treating this like a crime scene and not collecting the necessary evidence. They also refused to let the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, assist in the investigation. SLED is South Carolina's state law enforcement agency, and you may have heard of them before in other cases in South Carolina. Luckily, SLED did take over the case 8 months after Judy's death. They re-examined everything. The autopsy reports, the pictures from the house, and from the accident site. When they revisited the house to actually collect evidence this time, they were, of course, worried that too much time had passed and any evidence could have been erased or tampered with. They did not walk away empty-handed, though. During Judy's alleged fall, there were very specifically shaped stocking holders hanging from the mantle. Andrea Canning of Dateline actually held one of these, and she attested that they were very heavy. Well, apparently the shape of the holders actually matched Judy's fatal wound to the head. They had also discovered blood splatter that was very high up on the wall above the ladder, which indicated a cast-off pattern. And if you don't know, cast-off is blood spewing off of a weapon. They used this to determine that Jamie Baldwin had in fact murdered his wife by striking her in the head with one of these holders. Jamie Baldwin would be indicted for the murder and arrested in August of 2018. The trial took place the following year in 2019. This was going to be an uphill climb for the prosecution, but they actually do an excellent job presenting their case. They allege that Judy had confronted Jamie yet again about his relationship with Terry, and a heated argument had ensued, and during this argument, Jamie had hit Judy with the stocking holder in a fit of rage. They allege that Jamie next had to decide how he was going to explain this. And then he decided that the whole falling off the ladder thing was not going to cut it. So he then decided that he was going to stage the car accident. They obviously needed to prove that the accident was staged. So they consulted with an accident reconstructionist with the State Highway Patrol. The reconstructionist, Lance Corporal Brian Trotter, testified that there was a perfect tire indentation photographed at the accident site. Jamie said that he was traveling about 55 to 60 miles per hour. And Trotter testified that it would be impossible for that perfect of an indentation to be found in a scenario where a car is plunging down an embankment at that speed, which totally makes sense. He theorized that the car had to be going about 5 miles per hour, alleging that Jamie had slowly rolled the car down the embankment to stage the accident. He also wanted to gather data from the vehicle's black box. Now, I did not know that cars had data recorders like this, but apparently the Jeep Wrangler did. However, there was no data. And this actually told Trotter more than if there had been data. Because you see, the data recorder is programmed to start recording in the event of an accident. So therefore, he determined that if there was no data, there was no accident. The state also had Dr. Janice Ross testify to Judy's wounds. She testified that the pattern of the stocking holder matched the fatal wound to Judy's head, and had said that due to the extremity of the wound, that Judy would have had to die within 5 minutes of the blow, meaning that she could not have been alive while in the car or during the supposed accident. However, during cross-examination, Dr. Ross did say that she could not rule out the possibility of an accident being the manner of death. As far as motive, the prosecution alleges that Jamie killed Judy so that he could be with Terry King, pointing out that she had moved in rather quickly after Judy's death. I think the most anticipated testimony would be from Terry herself. She had testified for the state, but didn't really do them any favors when she testified that her and Jamie did not have a romantic relationship. However, the prosecutors would ask her about some text messages between her and Jamie. They had excessively texted each other, "I love you." Terry even texting once, "You could tell me 1,000 times a day and I would never get tired of hearing it." And one text from Jamie to her, "You better not be talking to any other men." During cross-examination, Terry insisted that their relationship was platonic and that they even slept in separate bedrooms. Regarding the messages, she says that she texts her friends that she loves them all the time. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I might text my friends that I love them every now and then, but definitely not this excessively, and I sure wouldn't be worried if they were talking to other people in a romantic sense. The defense had a pretty good case too. The first thing that they are going to bring up is the investigation, or lack thereof, as I should say. However, they do agree that the stocking holder probably caused Judy's head wound. But they say that she probably just hit her head on it during her fall. But what about what Dr. Ross said about her having to have died within 5 minutes, and therefore could not have been alive in the car? Well, they have an expert testify that due to the blood patterns found inside and outside the Jeep, this indicates that Judy was alive and actively bleeding during this time. They also point out that out of 3 pathologists, including the prosecution, none of them could definitively rule out an accident being the manner of death. The case goes to the jury, and they only deliberate for 3 hours, which is a crazy amount of time for a case this complicated. The jury does find Jamie Baldwin guilty of murder, and he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jamie's conviction was a major win for Judy's sons and the rest of her loved ones. They were finally able to get a sense of closure and felt that justice had been served for their beloved Judy. Jamie Baldwin's attorneys did file an appeal under the grounds that a picture of Jamie and the then Chester County Sheriff Alex Underwood was shown to the jury. Jamie's attorneys say that this biased the jury. I'm assuming because it might have made it look like Jamie was tight with the sheriff, and therefore that could show that that's why they didn't investigate him initially. Interestingly enough, Sheriff Underwood would be suspended by the governor of South Carolina and indicted on charges of corruption, which I believe he was later convicted of. According to reporting done by the Herald, they also say that the pathologist for the state testified outside of her expertise. Now, as far as appeals go, these claims are kind of weak, in my opinion, and apparently the appeals court agreed. They acknowledged that the pictures should not have been shown to the jury, but since it really didn't have any relevance, it did not impact the outcome of the trial. Jamie's appeal would ultimately be denied. This case is a really complicated one, and I have to be honest, I'm not convinced either way that this was a murder or an accident. And when I say I'm not convinced, I don't mean that I think it's one or the other. I just really don't know. And don't get me wrong, they definitely had a case against Jamie. For starters, I 100% believe that there was something going on between Jamie Baldwin and Terry King. Nothing about their texts or her moving in with him so fast screamed platonic relationship to me. And the fact that neither Judy or Jamie called 911 or either of Jamie's sons after her alleged fall really seems super weird, and it seems uncharacteristic of Judy to not have done this. A couple of other things that make me lean towards homicide are that perfect tire pattern and the cast-off splatter. I wholeheartedly agree that that tire pattern would not have come out that perfect in the event of a car spinning out of control at over 50 miles per hour. I also don't believe that cast-off pattern would be there in the event of Judy falling off the ladder. And that is simply because the pattern is above the ladder and gravity just doesn't work that way. In the event of a fall, the splatter would be below the height of the ladder, not above. I also want to talk about the defense expert that testified that the blood in the car indicated that Judy was alive and actively bleeding. Now, he's an expert, and I'm just a YouTuber, and most definitely am not an expert. But I think it's reasonable to believe that there would still be blood in the car whether Judy was alive or not. I mean, blood doesn't just disappear once you are deceased. And okay, maybe she was alive in the car, but who's to say that she was conscious? Maybe Jamie only thought she was dead and still staged the accident to cover it up. I might be getting a little too speculative here, so I'm just gonna move on. Now, the only reasons I'm not convinced that it wasn't an accident are, for starters, none of the experts could definitively conclude that it wasn't an accident. And the story about the fall makes sense to me to some degree. Besides the cast-off pattern, the rest of the blood evidence in the house matches Jamie's story. However, I do have a hard time believing that Judy could have hit her head hard enough on the stocking holder during a fall to have killed her. I definitely think it's more plausible that Jamie hit her with it. And now that I'm talking this all out, I think I lean more towards murder. But this is a complicated case, and I really want to know what you guys think, because, I mean, I just totally talked myself off of the fence, and I really want you guys to load up them comments and engage on social media, because I'd be really curious to know where you guys lean. I also want to make it clear that even though I just kind of talked everything out about this case is not about Jamie Baldwin and whether or not this was a murder or an accident. This case is about Judy Orr Baldwin, and she deserves to be remembered for who she was and not how she died. Judy was a beloved mother, grandmother, and friend. Judy never got to see her grandkids grow up, and no matter how she died, She did not deserve it. And I am glad that her loved ones can now grieve her loss and get closure, and they finally have justice for Judy Baldwin. May Judy Baldwin rest in peace. Thank you everyone for watching, and please do not be shy and utilize those comments with your thoughts on this case. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you do not miss out on any new content. Also, hit me up on social media. You can follow the channel on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have a case in mind for the channel, you can always hit me up on social media, or you can email your suggestion to truecrimeguruchannel@gmail.com.